I think it's important to realize that you want to coach your team with excellence in the sense that your first post stated that you went winless in a season, and now your following post is asking for fun games, for post-season games. So there's a bit of a paradox, right? Because you're down on yourself because you haven't won a game, but now you're asking for just fun ideas for end of the season training. So I would argue that the last practice of the season should be the same as the first practice and everyone in between, right? Because you can have a lot of fun and turn every single game into a quote-unquote pizza party if you really wanted to, but the things that matter the most come before the things that matter the least. So there are two formats that I envision for your practice that you could do every single time. If a majority of the players on your team do not have the fundamentals, right? They can't dribble and they can't juggle, pass or shoot. I kind of combine passing and shooting into juggling. So if they can't dribble and they can't juggle, then you want to do these 4 things every practice. Ball mastery, dribbling sequences, juggling games, and then 1v1 to cones. So for ball mastery, the pattern is learn a move during a practice. The following practice, review the last move, learn a new move. So then the third practice of the season, it's review, and then the third move, right? So there's a progression over time. So by the end of the season, they could learn between 20 to 25 to 50 skills moves, and you could learn all those through Cover Coaching. That's COERVER, Cover Coaching, or there's an app, Android, Apple Store, or on YouTube. The next pattern, or the next part, is dribbling sequences. Dribbling sequences, just a rhythmic pattern, and what it does is it helps players get out of their head and into the ball. And because it's easy to say and it's easy to do. So with a ball, with the right foot, you go. It's hard to see this. You go outside, outside, inside, outside, inside, outside, outside, inside, outside, inside. Right? So you have your players do this rhythmic dribbling sequence: outside, outside, inside, outside, inside. Then they switch feet. Outside, outside, inside, outside, inside. You can have them do this in a sectioned off area, so you could have everyone do this dribbling sequence within the 18-yard box, or you could have them do laps around the field, either going clockwise or counterclockwise. And you want to tell them to say it out loud when they're doing it. They should say it out loud when they're doing it, because this helps them develop a mind-body connection, right? It helps them internalize it, so that what's going to happen is they're not going to be thinking about dribbling when they're on the field. They're just going to be able to start to dance around defenders, right? Because it's going to help them develop a deeper awareness of the ball at their feet, and it allows them not have to think about dribbling. So that's why dribbling sequences are so powerful, and they're fun. The third thing is juggling games. A really fun juggling game that's effortless and that you need close to zero equipment is you have the whole entire team take a ball in their hands, and then you have them form a circle around a garbage bin or a bucket, right? You could buy a $20 brute bucket from your local hardware store, or just order one online. And you have everyone try and juggle the ball using their right foot, left foot, both feet alternating, right thigh, left thigh, both thighs alternating, and then finishing with any part of the body you want, And then you could do this with or without a bounce. And the reason why this game scales beautifully is because players who are more beginner can use a bounce and can start closer to the barrel or the bin. Players who are more advanced, they can start further away and they can remove the bounce. So in this way, you could have a player who's been playing the game for, you could have a more advanced player doing the same drill with a more beginner player, and they won't slow each other down. But you got to make sure that you don't use a whistle for each part of the progression, right? You want to have, right, if Tommy's better, or if Cindy's better than Tracy, then you don't want her to, if she spends the whole 15 minutes trying to do left foot with a bounce, you gotta let her do that. But if Tracy can go through the whole progression, right foot, left foot, both feet alternating, right thigh, left thigh, both thighs alternating, and then finishing on any part of the body she wants, if she can get through the whole progression, right, you don't want to stifle her growth because the other girl is going at a slower pace. So, or vice versa, right? If you pause the juggling game because one person gets the right foot before all the other players do, this prevents them from really practicing through this skills game. So you don't want to use a whistle when you're doing the skills game. You want everyone, right? The goal is it's juggling with forward ambulation. Forward ambulation means moving forward, but since you have a target to aim for, the barrel, it helps players orient, right? It allows them so that when they get on the field, they can take the ball out of the air and then orient themselves to the target, which is usually the goal. And this, you could spend 10, 15 minutes doing this, and it's, even if you have a lot of players, right, they're going to be bumping into each other. They're going to be, some of them are going to be bickering. It's a lot of fun, even in tight quarters, right? So it's going to help them grow because it's going to challenge them to, navigate this game while having to deal with the other players on their team who are also trying to score on the bucket. And the last part is simple: 1v1 to cones. Right, you line up a grid of cones. Every 3 steps, you put a cone down. Right, you want the cones that you can knock over with a ball, and then with a matching, then you put a cone that mirrors your cone line, and you just make a grid, right, a couple yards apart. And you don't want it too far because you really want to encourage them to get a lot of touches, shielding on the ball, and it kind of puts your whole practice together into that 1v1 to cones, right? Because it's ball mastery, it's dribbling sequences, but it also includes shielding, and finishing on cones, and finishing on the cones. So it's a fun game to end with that really helps them grow, right? Because you could say the whole game of soccer it's a whole bunch of 1v1 interactions, and that's an oversimplification, but you get the idea, right? If you can't perform, if a player can't shield the ball against another player, they have to be able to finish, to beat a defender and take a shot on goal, or they have to be able to stop a defender or an attacker in a 1v1 battle, right? So 1v1 is very, very important, and when you end the practice on the 1v1 game, it ends it on a very high note, and players are going to have a memory of it being a fun practice. Okay, so that's kind of a skills development routine that you could do every single practice for players who don't have great fundamentals. If players do have fundamentals, then here's something that you could do every single practice. It's possession, finishing on goal, crossing and finishing, and then playing to big goals that are brought close together on a small field, and you split the team up into 3, and the team that's sitting out surrounds the field, acting as neutral players with 1 touch. So possession, right? Possession game, you could call it, you keep the ball away from the other team for 4 passes, or for, you keep possession away from the other team for 4 passes that scores 1 point or something like that. And you could say first team to 5 points wins the possession game. And then you want to make sure the areas a little bit smaller so that it forces them to maximize the space, and it forces speed of play, and it forces them to be creative with the ball. And then, as the team grows, you could start limiting their touch count. So you could say instead of unlimited touch, now they only have 2 touch with 1 on the takeover. 1 on the takeover means if one team wins the ball from the other team, there's kind of a scrap, right? It's not clear who has clear possession of the ball, but once one team clearly wins possession of the ball, then they have 2 touches, right? So you get 1 touch for kind of stealing the ball away from the other team, and then 2 touches to play out. And then, as your team gets very advanced, you could even drop it down to teams have 1 touch with 1 in the takeover. But, your team has to be, pretty good for you to do that. The next thing is finishing on goal. And yes, you said, God forbid that your players stand in line for more than 30 seconds. But if you do your finishing drill right, you have players line up about 10 yards outside of the 18-yard box, and they're going as fast as they can, finishing on goal into the side netting, right? It should be rapid fire. They shouldn't be in line more than 30 seconds, to be honest, especially if you're going at a high tempo. The only problem with this thing is that it's psychologically taxing for goalkeepers. So you want to tell your goalkeeper that they can go in and out of the goal whenever they please, because you don't need a goalkeeper for you to execute this part of the practice elegantly. Right? You just have your players go at full speed, and then it's a low, hard driven ball into the side nettings of the goal. Right? So what this is training, it's training for it's muscle memory, but it's also mental memory, right? You're training them to, when they, break away, they run right to the goal, and then they just finish on goal, right? So it's built into them, so they won't hesitate or freeze when it comes to game time. It'll just become more and more natural the more they do it. Next thing that you do is finishing on goal, crossing and finishing. So you have 4 lines, 2 crossing lines that are alternating, and then 2 finishing lines in the center that are crisscrossing, finish 1 touch on goal. And you're starting all these lines at the halfway line. So the way it looks like is the balls are at the right wingers, the right line, and the left line. Right line dribbles up. Let's say the right line goes first. Right line dribbles up, crosses the ball. The 2 middle lines, their run is slightly delayed, right? So you could start that line a little closer, or you could just have the 2 center players delay their run. So the right player dribbles up, crosses the ball, then the 2 middle lines, they just finish on goal. And then the left side goes. Left side dribbles the ball up, curved, slightly diagonal, curved run, crosses the ball, and the 2 players on the inside finish on goal. And then you might have to reset the balls a few times to the right and left side, because the balls will either go into the net if your players finish successfully, or they'll miss wide, so then they'll have to go and chase them. So you want all your lines rotating, right? Crossers become attackers, finishers, and then the finishers can become crossers, just so you mix it up. And that could be not even 10-15 minutes right there. And then it's playing to big goals. So you want to split your team up into 3. That's the most important part. And the reason you want to split your team up into 3 is because if you just have 2 teams scrimmaging against each other and one team scores against the other team, nothing is gained and nothing is lost. But if you have 3 teams that are playing King of the Hill style, and one team scores on the other team and that team has to get off, they're not going to like that. So teams really raise their intensity and competition level when there's something on the line, because players who love to play, which means they never want to get off the field, right? They don't want to play as a neutral player. with one touch on the outside. They want to be, you take, it's like a status. It's like an inter-team status game. Who can stay on the field the longest and knock all the other teams off, right? So the last part is you split your team up into 3 teams, and then you bring the, ideally you have big goals that you bring close on a small field, and then the team that's sitting out plays as neutral players surrounding the field with one touch. And what this does is it keeps the players on the outside engaged, right? Because the better that they play, then the faster that they'll get to go be back on the field playing again, right? So it's kind of just a beautiful setup that really raises competition and intensity levels. And it's rare that you'll play a game, be more intense than the other team, and lose. So I think the real question is, how do I help my team raise their intensity levels in a fun way, right? So now you have 2 different sequences of events that you can run, right? 2 different styles of practice. The skills style focus practice is Tom Turnbull, right? That's Tom Turnbull's soccer skills and drills training routine. And then the second one is Doug Nevins, former Gatorade Coach of the Year, his practice routine. So the hard part is deciding whether your players, well, it's not that hard, but you just have to make the decision of, does the majority of my team, you have to be aware, does the majority of my team have the fundamentals? And if they do, then you go to the Doug Nevins training routine. If they don't have the fundamentals, then you do Tom Turnbull's training routine. And each one of these things, you do the same thing every practice. And what you'll notice is that the players will actually get better, not just in their skills, but they'll get better at the practice because they anticipated. And both of these practices styles, both the skills practice and the team practice, are a lot of fun. So they'll start to, and they'll know what to expect next. So even though the same sequence of events is happening every time, there's still going to be variation. It's like you go to work. You go to work, and work might be the same, but there's still different things that happen every day at work. So it's just like this practice. Even though it's the same thing, a lot of coaches are always looking for new drills, new exercises, new activities. You want the same exact thing every single practice, assuming that they're high quality, drills or you want them to be fun. But if you keep them the same, then your players are really gonna excel at the practice. So hopefully some of these ideas help. Reach out with any questions. All right, thank you.